So here we go with the box office top 10, starting sort of problematically at number 10, number 9 in America, and that's Anaconda.
Yeah, and number 10 and number 9, which is Anaconda and the SpongeBob movie, I haven't caught up
still.
with.
But weeks and weeks ago.
I'm reviewing. Yeah, I was off for 1 week over Christmas, right? And this happened, and I haven't been able to catch up because since then, because we're now in the awards corridor thing, there are like 6, 7, 8 important movies coming out every week. Plus, we've got a new feature with 5 questions that I have to learn. Plus, we're doing the thing with Pete Docter that we did before. I'm sorry.
Number 9 is the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants. Number 8 in the, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. Have you seen that?
You know I've seen that. We did a whole conversation about the fact that they're reissuing all the extended versions, and you can either do them in a marathon, which was 12 hours, 17 minutes, with 15-minute intervals between the films, which honestly,
not long enough for anything.
The queue for the loo is going to be nuts, isn't it? But yeah, I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I've never read the novel Lord of the Rings, and I don't have any intention to do so. And I don't like the Hobbit movies at all, but I do love the Lord of the Rings films.
UK number 7, nowhere in America, is Rental Family. This email from James says, I have often listened to your excellent podcast and subsequently seen the films you discuss. However, noting that your opinion of said films and mine often diverge, this is the first time such a difference of opinion has motivated me to write in.
Okay.
Rental Family is a charming, moving and uplifting film and a genuine achievement. I wholeheartedly recommend it to all my fellow listeners. In closing, solidarity with the annexed population of Venezuela. Oh, okay, there you go. That's lots of politics there. But anyway, James, thank you very much indeed. Who thinks Rental Family is charming, moving and uplifting?
I think charming is the right word. My issue with it is that it isn't much more than that. And I think that because when it had initially played and there was quite a lot of awards buzz about it, I was expecting it to be something slightly deeper. And we had talked about the fact that Werner Herzog had made that film about the rental family phenomenon, which actually had an awful lot of sort of darkness underneath it. And there isn't much darkness in this. I mean, there's a certain amount of poignant sadness, but really it's a film that rests very heavily on the shoulders of the incredibly likable Brendan Fraser. And I understand that, but I think charming is exactly the right word. I wanted more than charming.
Zootropolis 2 is at number 6, number 3 in America.
Still doing brilliantly, still doing basically what Zootropolis did, which I liked the first time and I enjoyed the second time.
Number 5 here and there is Marty Supreme. This from, well, it's just signed O, as in the letter O.
Okay.
It turns out there's a backstory to the use of Tears for Fears, Peter Gabriel, and so on in Marty Supreme. And I mentioned the Corgis track.
Yes, everybody's got to learn sometime.
According to a piece in Variety, an early version of the script had a 1980s set framing device in which an old Marty, who has become a successful owner of shoe shops, is at a Tears for Fears gig with his granddaughter, and the music prompts his ping-pong memories, hence the 1980s songs, to which, once he had worked with them, Safdie had become sufficiently attached that he kept them in even after abandoning the framing device. And that done, the songs went on to influence the score more generally, vintage 1980s synths, and so on. So that's the backstory.
That's interesting. I had no idea about that at all, because obviously the remnants of that don't exist in the film. I had read an interview which had talked about the rise of electronica in the 50s and that then working thing. But that is interesting. It also, I mean, as I said, the problem with anachronistic music is only a problem if it starts to bug you. But if it does start to bug you, it is a problem. And I know it did bug you.
Yes, it's interesting. But why did it bug me and just speaking about electronic music, you know, for example, the famous Vangelis soundtrack to Chariots of Fire, which should have had, you would imagine, sort of some 1920s Charleston in there. And there is some Gilbert and Sullivan, as I remember, on the boat over to France. But maybe because I don't know what order it came out in, but it was just, I guess because it wasn't a hit music-based soundtrack. There were
it's an original score. Yeah, exactly.
It was original score, so therefore it wasn't problematic. Anyway, that was each to their own. Marty Supreme is at number 5. Number 4 here. Number 1 in America is Avatar: Fire and Ash. I think
But it's interesting only that in week 5, I mean, it has taken a huge amount of money, but it's down at number 4 in week 5. This massive, massive behemoth of a film. And I suppose I kind of expected it to sit around in the top 3 for longer than that.
I mean, the figures that we've got, it's taken 38 million. So it's
it's taken a bunch of money. Maybe the reason it's dropping is because everyone's seen it.
I did see a quote saying that they're going to have to try and find a way of making the future movies cheaper if they're going to stay on course. But anyway, for another day, we've done enough Avatar. I think that's at number 4. Number 3 here is Hamnet. Here's this is a great piece from Dr. Bill Pollard. BSc, MA, MPhil, PhD, Diploma in Therapeutic Counselling, ASA 25-metre breaststroke, 1976. And Dr. Bill is in Henley-on-Thames. Okay. Dear Flying Gull and Tobacco, a very long-term listener, first-time emailer, Vanguardista, but not ultra, because I love you, but not in that way. Okay, I think you might have misunderstood something there, Bill. Further to last week's anachronistic bird in Hamnet.
Yes,
in which we were talking about just the very opening, it being the wrong kind of hawk.
Somebody had written in to alert us to this. They had said it was the hill upon which they would die.
Just as it looked like Jessie Buckley's Agnes had gloved said hawk for the first time, what does Paul Mescal's William Shakespeare do? He jumps into the River Avon to let off some steam, only to start doing the front crawl. Well, I was outraged. As church members will know, the overarm action of the front crawl was not seen in England until 1844, when the British Swimming Society invited Native American Ojibwe swimmers, Flying Gull and Tobacco, to London to demonstrate their stroke. Their stroke was described as, quotes, lashing the water like windmill sails, and did not catch on. Spectators found all the splashing to be, quotes, un-European. And the British stuck to their more civilized breaststroke. Your listeners may also recall that in 1873, English swimmer John Trudgeon introduced a hybrid stroke with overarm action and breaststroke scissor kick, which was used in the first Olympics of 1896. And it wasn't until 1903 that front crawl, as we know it, involving a flutter kick, was introduced to Europe by Australian swimmers Henry Wickham and Sid and Charles Cavill, and was adopted for the 1912 Olympics. It is perhaps fortunate that in the scene in Hamnet, we are not given a view of Mr. Shakespeare's leg action, so we cannot establish if he was doing the arm action alone, the trudgeon, the Australian crawl, or even some of the more modern derivative shudder, but this would merely determine the level of anachronism, not the fact of it. One thing is for certain, as a proud Englishman in 1596, Mr. Shakespeare would have had nothing to do with all that splashing. Love the show, Steve, tickety-tonk, and so on. And there you have it. So genius. Regardless of the fact I think the film is fantastic, you think the film is very good with some reservations, the two aspects that we did not pick up on as being problematic, one, the wrong bird, and then two, very specialist, the wrong stroke that Shakespeare does when he jumps in the water. Who would have thought it?
There used to be a column in Viz magazine which was Mark Kermode's movie bloopers, and it was a picture of me and then a list of really stupid movies. One of which was, such and such a film is set in 1915, but is shot in color. They didn't invent color until 1923. And then the other one was, if you see Free Willy, the big problem is that as the whale jumps over the thing at the end, if you look closely, you notice that the whale is wearing a digital watch. And the whole sort of point of the thing was people noticing things that are, that are complete. But in the case of this, the fact that it's not one, but two anachronisms that have driven people to go, I'm sorry, I'm not having anything.
I mean, you can imagine how both might have got through. I'm just intrigued. So if you were in the water, if you're just chucked in the water, I suppose what we call doggy paddle
paddle
is the most instinctive, the kind of thing that a baby would do or a child would naturally do, doggy paddle. But breaststroke seems no more natural than crawl.
No.
I mean, butterfly is obviously ludicrous.
No, I mean, I can't do breaststroke, and the weird leggy thing that they do with breaststroke, which is kind of like, the legs like that, I can't, But there we go. He would have just drowned. He would have just anachronistically drowned and never written none of those plays.
So when you see Hamnet, you can nudge the person next to you, say, wrong hawk, wrong stroke. There you go. Apart from that, fantastic. Number 2 in the UK, number 4 in Canada, The Housemaid.
I mean, the high camp continues to score high, apparently. It's rubbish, but it's enjoyable rubbish. Okay,
so number 1 here, number 2 in America, 28 years later, The Bone Temple. So let me give you some emails and then we can go again. Andrew in Liverpool, a long-term listener. You had me from Sex and the City to ranting first-time emailer about Bone Temple. What a fantastic movie. The tension at points was causing me to sweat and squirm uncomfortably in my cinema chair. There were audible code-compliant gasps at certain barn scenes, but then in the next breath, inclusive audience laugh-out-loud moments, which made the funny bits, and there were lots of them, even more funny. DaCosta took a fantastic script and turns it into something that is brutal to the point of becoming almost too nasty. For me, it was. But her directing ability to diffuse something so horrendous and cut to something hilariously funny in an instant was so slick that it never weakened either the horror or the comedy. Led by 2 amazing performances from Ralph Fiennes and Jack O'Connell, who give everything to their performances, by the end of the movie, it felt like the entire cinema, and then Andrew says, was ready to stand and embrace the devil, which you might misconstrue if you haven't seen the film, because that's not it's not what we're standing up and embracing.
No.
This movie perfectly set up the redemption arc for the last installment, and I cannot wait. Thank you, Andrew. Kaya Kanak in London. Having enjoyed 28 years later and been at your Christmas spectacular to experience your excellent interview with Nia DaCosta, me and my girlfriend went into Bone Temple excited to see what was next. We lasted just over an hour before having to walk out. Our conclusion was that the film was unnecessarily violent. You might say that we should have known what we were letting ourselves in for, given the skull-popping gruesomeness of the previous film, but the violence in this one felt different, whereas 28 years later's more vomit-inducing moments felt like they were furthering the plot, this felt like it crossed the border into gore porn. The charity scene in particular felt like it belonged more in a mindless horror film like Saw than it did a film that is supposed to be exploring how humanity functions when society collapses in an interesting way. Based on plot synopses I've read since, I honestly feel you could have taken that scene out of the movie without it really changing the course of the story. We already know that Jack O'Connor's character is the embodiment of evil. I mean, he's a Satanist dressed as Jimmy Savile, for heaven's sake. Could the film not have relied on the audience's intelligence to connect the dots instead of feeling the need to show us such a visceral and drawn-out way? It's a shame because the film had really good elements. I think the cinematography was beautiful. The acting from Ralph Fiennes in particular was great, and DaCosta's direction was largely spot on. I just feel the level of gore was a misstep. Thank you, Kaya. And one more from Charlie. Bone Temple is a better, more dramatically coherent film than 28 years later, and has virtually none of the many glaring logic fails of the earlier film, but its box office failure cannot be a surprise. Box office failure, Charlie, it's at number 1 and number 2 in America. I think that counts as a success, but anyway. Following up a film with variable word of mouth, with one lacking much of a plot and wallowing in unnecessary torture porn was an odd choice. Nia DaCosta's film was certainly a deeper and considerably more intense movie, but one I will probably never rewatch. After the ending, also, the ending was just as bad and utterly illogical as the earlier films, tonally again as if plucked from an entirely different movie. In the same way, the inexplicable Jimmy Savile attire is never addressed. No kids in 2002 were remotely aware of Savile, nor how children survived in post-apocalyptic zombie hellscape, so we can guess the many questions of how around Bone Temple's ending will be ignored if indeed there is a trilogy film. Not a great way to treat an audience all round. Narratively, some main character endings in Bone Temple seem very odd choices for a mooted film trilogy too. All in all, an oddity of a film. I think Charlie saw something else, but anyway... So a variety of opinions there, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We appear to be sort of out of step with those emails. In terms of the violence, I think I did say this at the time. Bone Temple is an 18. 28 years later was 15. So you would have known from the BBFC. And as we said, nowadays you have to work to get an 18 certificate a lot of the time, particularly when what you're doing. And they did. I didn't have a problem with it. Partly that'll be because I'm a horror fan, and so I tend to be. What's the thing that they say in The Simpsons? If I don't watch the violence, how can I become desensitized to it? And partly because I think it is necessary. I think the charity sequence is necessary, and the fact that it's the word charity, because you have to get a sense that the point about this film is that the infected are not the problem anymore. That the real horror comes from the people who have survived, and to use the phrase that came up in your interview, he said they're thriving, they're excelling, that they are exploiting the fact that the apocalypse has happened, and they are having the best time of anyone. And I think that has to be depicted as absolutely loathsome. And I don't have a problem with the violence. I do understand, however, that if you do have a problem with it, obviously that's going to be a red line. But it's why it's always good to go to the BBFC advice. This has upped the certificate from the previous film. As far as the second email is concerned, I'm surprised that you disliked it that much. I'm quite impressed.
It's also factually wrong. It's not a box office failure. It's a huge hit.
I'm just looking at the figures. So on the wiki page, it says that the budget is 63 and the box office so far is 30.6. But I don't know when that will have been updated. And as you say, it has gone to number 1 in the UK box office. Did you say it's number 2 in America? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're still in week 1, but it's I don't know. It's not a huge box office opening, obviously, and the thing is, in order to clear 60, you do need to take 120, and I don't know whether we're going to get to that figure, but it has. Yeah, I'm surprised because almost everyone I've spoken to has really, really enjoyed it. Yeah. But obviously, people react to films individually. The Jimmy Savile stuff, I actually think that it does work, and I think that it solves the problem of why your response at the end of the first film, and also my response, which was what? Sorry, what? And it does make some kind of sense that this is this monstrous creation. So it worked for me.